The title of the Gosho is the rationale for writing on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land. Let's first listen to the background of this Gosho. In the first month of 1268, envoys from Khubilai Khan arrived in Kamakura and presented the shogunate with a message demanding, in veiled terms, that Japan acknowledge fealty to the Mongol Empire. The envoys were sent back without an answer, and the government began taking steps to defend the country against foreign attack. At this time, Nichiren Daishonin wrote the short work known as the Rationale for writing on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land and sent it to a priest named Hōkan. Little is known about him. He was a Buddhist priest, but he would appear to have been active in government circles. The Daishonin explains the circumstances that led to his writing on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land 8 years earlier and points out that the arrival of the Mongol emissaries with a demand for allegiance substantiates the prophecy of foreign invasion that he had made in that treatise. In the 10th month of the same year, Nichiren Daishonin sent letters to 11 high-ranking political and religious leaders, including the regent Hojo Tokumen, the Zen priest Doryu of Kencho-ji, and the True Word Precepts priest Ryokan of Gokuraku-ji, pointing out that the predictions in his on establishing the correct teaching were now being fulfilled and demanding the opportunity to demonstrate the validity of his teachings in public religious debate. He received no any response to his letters. Now listen to the Gosho. In the first year of the Shoka era, 1257, with the cyclical sign Hinoto-mi, on the 23rd day of the 8th month, at the time when the hour of the dog gives way to the hour of the boar, around 9 p.m., there occurred an earthquake of unprecedented magnitude. In the second year of the same era, cyclical sign Tsushino-uma, on the first day of the 8th month, there was a great wind. In the third year, cyclical sign Tsushinoto Hitsuji, a major famine occurred. In the first year of the Shogun era, 1259, cyclical sign Tsushinoto Hitsuji, epidemics were rampant, and throughout the 4 seasons of the second year, cyclical sign Kanu Saru, the epidemics continued to rage without abating. By this time more than half the people of the nation had been laid low by death. The ruler of the country, alarmed at this state of affairs, turned to the scriptures of Buddhism and the non-Buddhist writings for help, ordering that various prayers be offered. These, however, failed to produce the slightest effect. On the contrary, famine and epidemics raged more fiercely than ever. Nichiren, observing this state of affairs, proceeded to consult the great collection of Buddhist scriptures. There I discovered the reason why these prayers are without effect and on the contrary actually make the situation worse, along with passages of proof to support it. In the end I had no other recourse than to compile a work to present my findings, entitling it on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land. In the first year of the Bunno era, 1260, cyclical sign Kanu Saru, on the 16th day of the 7th month, at the hour of the dragon, 7 o'clock to 9 a.m., I handed it to the lay priest Yadoya for presentation to his lordship, the lay priest of Saimyoji, who is now deceased. This I did solely that I might repay the debt of gratitude that I owe to my native land. The essence of this memorial is as follows. Buddhism was first introduced from the kingdom of Peach to Japan during the reign of Emperor Khubilai, the 30th of the human sovereigns, in the 100 reigns of sovereigns following the 7 reigns of the heavenly deities and the 5 reigns of the earthly deities. From that time until the reign of Emperor Kamu, the 50th human sovereign, a period of some 260 years, the various Buddhist scriptures were brought to Japan, as well as the 6 schools of Buddhism. At this time, however, the Tian Tai and True Word schools had not yet been introduced. During the reign of Emperor Kamu, there was a young priest named Seiko, who was a disciple of the administrator of priests Juhyo of Yamashina-dera Temple. He later came to be known as the great teacher Dengyo. He made a thorough study of the 6 schools that had been introduced to Japan earlier, as well as of the Zen doctrine, but none of these seemed to satisfy him. Earlier, in the reign of Emperor Shomu, the Reverend Chen Ganjin, of Tang China had come to Japan and brought with him the commentaries of Tian Tai. 40 or more years had passed, and Seiko was the first person to peruse them and understand the profound meaning of Buddhism. In the 4th year of the Enryaku era, 785, Seiko founded a temple on Mount Hiei in order to ensure the continuance of peace in heaven and on earth. Emperor Kamu paid honor to the new establishment, designating it as a place of worship where prayers could be offered to the guardian star of the ruler. He ceased to heed the teachings of the 6 schools and instead gave wholehearted allegiance to the perfect doctrines of the Tendai school. In the 13th year of the Enryaku era, the emperor moved the capital from Nagaoka to the city of Heian. In the 21st year of the same era, on the 19th day of the 1st month, the emperor summoned 14 great scholars of the 6 schools from the 7 major temples of Nara, including such priests as Gonzo and Choyo, to Takao-dera temple, and ordered them to engage Seiko in debate. These masters of the 6 schools were not able to hold their own against Seiko even for a single exchange of opinions, to the extent that their mouths became as incapable of speech as their noses. The 5 teachings of the Flower Garland school, the 3 periods of the Dharma characteristic school, and the 2 storehouses and 3 periods propounded by the 3 treatises school 3, all of these doctrines were demolished by Seiko. Not only were the doctrines of the 6 schools refuted, but it was demonstrated how they all go against the correct teaching. On the 29th day of the same month, the emperor handed down an edict severely criticizing the 14 debaters who had confronted Seiko. These priests in turn drew up a letter apologizing for their conduct and submitted it to the emperor. Thereafter, one sovereign after another paid allegiance to Mount Hiei, treating it with even greater deference than a filial son shows toward his father and mother, regarding it with greater awe than the common people manifest before the might of the ruler. At times the rulers issued edicts to honor it, at other times they were obliged to give their approval to its unjust demands. We may note in particular that Emperor Saiwa was able to ascend the throne as a consequence of the powerful prayers of the Reverend Iryo of Mount Hiei. The emperor's maternal grandfather, the minister of the right Kujo, for this reason submitted a written pledge of his fidelity to Mount Hiei. The general of the right Minamoto no Yoritomo, the founder of the Kamakura shogunate, it will be recalled, was a descendant of Emperor Saiwa. And yet the government authorities in Kamakura, though they may or may not be following the right course in their administration, ignore and turn their back on Mount Hiei. Have they no fear of the punishment of heaven? In the time of the retired Emperor Gotoba, during the Kenin era, 1201 to 1204, there were 2 arrogant men, in Hunan and Dainichi. Their bodies were possessed of demons, and they went about deluding the people of both high and low station throughout the country, until everyone had become a Nembutsu believer or else joined the Zen school. Those who continued to pay respect to Mount Hiei became surprisingly few and lacking in ardor, and throughout the country the priests who were authorities on the Lotus Sutra or the true word teachings found themselves ignored and rejected. As a result, the sun goddess, great Bodhisattva Hachiman, and the gods of the 7 shrines of Sano, who guard and protect Mount Hiei, as well as the other great benevolent deities who protect the different parts of the nation, could no longer taste the flavor of the law. Their power and brilliance waned, and they abandoned the country. Thus the demons gained access to the nation and brought about disasters and calamities. These disasters, as I stated in my memorial, were omens signifying that our country would in the end be destroyed by a foreign nation. Later, in the 1st year of the Bunai era, 1264, cyclical sign Kaino Ni, on the 5th day of the 7th month, a comet appeared in the east, and its light shone over the whole country of Japan. This is an evil portent such as has never been seen before since the beginning of history. None of the authorities on the Buddhist scriptures or the non-Buddhist writings could understand what had brought about such an ill omen. I became even more grieved and distressed. Now, 9 years after I presented my memorial, to the lay priest of Saimyoji, in the intercalary 1st month of this year, the official letter arrived from the great kingdom of the Mongols. The events that have occurred match the predictions made in my memorial as exactly as do the 2 halves of a tally. The Buddha left this prediction, saying, 100 or more years after my passing, A ruler named Ashoka the Great will appear in the world and will spread my relics far and wide. In the reign of King Zhao, the fourth ruler of the Zhou dynasty, the grand historian Su Yu made this prediction. A sage has been born in the western region. 1,000 years from now, the words of this sage will be brought to this country. Prince Shotoku predicted, after my death, when 200 years or more have passed, the city of Heian will be established in the province of Yamashiro. And the great teacher Tiantai predicted, 200 years or more after my death, I will be reborn in an eastern country and will spread my correct teaching. All of these predictions were fulfilled to the letter. When I, Nichiren, observed the great earthquake of the Shoka era, and the great wind and famine that occurred in the same era, as well as the major outbreak of epidemics that took place in the first year of the Shogun era, I made a prediction, saying, these are omens indicating that this country of ours will be destroyed by a foreign nation. I may seem to be praising myself for having made such a prediction, but if our country should be destroyed, it would most certainly mean the destruction of the Buddhist teachings as well. The eminent Buddhist priests of our time seem to be of one mind with those who slander the law. In fact, they do not even understand the true meaning of the teachings of their own schools. It is certain that, if they should receive an imperial command or instructions from the government authorities to offer prayers in an effort to avert the evils that beset the nation, they would only make the Buddhas and deities angrier than they are already, and then the nation could not help but face ruin. I, Nichiren, understand the steps that should be taken to remedy the situation. Other than the sage of Mount Hiei, I am the only person in all of Japan who does. Just as there are not two suns or two moons, so two sages are not to be found standing side by side. If these words of mine are false, then may I be punished by the 10 demon daughters who protect the Lotus Sutra that I embrace. I say all this solely for the sake of the nation, for the sake of the law, for the sake of others, not for my own sake. I will be calling on you in person, and so I am informing you of this. If you do not heed my advice, you will surely regret it later. With my deep respect, Nichiren, the 5th day of the 4th month in the 5th year of Bunai, 1268, cyclical sign Tsushino Tatsu, to the Reverend Hōkan.